It is the beginning of the new year, and Zoom kind of changed my system. Um, this is Wild Wednesdays, and I sent a link that I assumed would still be usable, and it looks like it disappeared. So I'm not expecting anybody to join me today, but I also invited all of you to join me today. So I'm going to go ahead and do the class, and it'll be a recording for all of you to enjoy. So I'm not going to play my dance music, but normally I want to kind of warm up with some music to be able to just feel my blood stirred and my tissue moving and some responsiveness, because this is a Soas savvy class. And to be Soas savvy, you've got to have some hydrated connective tissue. You've got to have a sense of your center moving out through your hands and your feet. You're a spine-based organism. So let's start today, however, on the ground. We're going to need a chair, and you're going to want to be able to play. So make sure the chair is solid, because we're going to learn how to get up on that chair and work with Soas and Latissimus in several different relationships. So let's get started. And deepest apologies for not thinking out the fact that Zoom in 2024 might actually change their protocol. My passwords, they said, were invalid because they have new protocol. And that's one reason you can't get on, is because they refused my password. So yeah, so here I am by myself on the first Wednesday of a wild new year. Let's get going. All righty. So silent my phone and come back into my space and welcome you here. So we're going to start. There's two things we're going to do today. We're going to work with psoas down into feet and latissimus up into arms. This is how we're one spine-based organism. You have one central axis governing conception vessel in the energetic world. And what we think of embryologically is the primal notochord, the development of literally a space in yourself that is not you, that is actually energetically something coming from the universe, you could say, out into the field to become you. So we're a spine-based organism is what it means. You develop around a central axis. Axis begins to bud arms and legs. And how we understand it muscularly is psoas is this very primal, juicy tissue coming from your spine out to your feet. It doesn't land in your feet. It stops at the legs. So it goes from core of our body, the solar plexus, to the legs as this tissue that sends information from spine, but it translates that through bone into feet. The latissimus is a very superficial tissue. We often think of it as our bat wings, our wings that allow our arms to fly, and other critters like bats, other mammals that have wings, how to fly, is a spatial, very superficial tissue, so to speak, but it grows out of our pelvis up into our arms. It's a triangular tissue. The psoas is a triangular tissue. One is very deep, the other is very on the surface of our body, almost ethereal, almost in the ethos, in the air. So we are working from the deepest core to what you might say the most superficial or most accessible to the translation between field and body. So the way we're going to play with this is we're going to start with grounding a little bit. Then we're going to see what the movement is from the spine to the foot, because this should be fluid. There should be this expression of your spine, moving in both directions, which means you not only come upright, but you ground like a tree. You're rooted and then you branch out. So let's get started. Here we are on the floor. And for those of you who've worked with me, you might want an inflatable ball nearby. You want to be able to use that on your side body. Wherever you want to start hydrating tissue, I work with inflatable balls. I take them down very low and I rock tissue so that the density in muscle, density in scar tissue, in connective tissue, stickiness, begins to dissolve into a more fluid expression. It's one reason we warm up with dance. So, constructive rest on your back, knees up, feet on the floor. This is the traditional access to your psoas. You ground here, you allow it to land here, and then you work with the relationship of bone. How do my bones land? Where do I feel the relationship of bone to ground? Take your leg, point it to the knee to the ceiling and drop the lower leg. Make sure shoes are off, your feet your toes can respond. And drop the foot. And you might notice, oh, I can feel my foot more. So psoas to foot. Oh, I'm starting to feel a connection between my spine and my foot. Then do the other side. And drop the foot. So now that we have both feet on the ground, you may notice, oh, wow, I have a lot of muscular efforting all around my bones. So another thing I do a lot is bone tapping. So let's take this knee one more time up and start just below the knee and tap into as close to the hip, but not into the pelvis, into the hip socket, just along the long bone called the femur. Just up and down, a rhythm, like your loose fist, but you're tapping into bone, and then drop the foot. And then do the other side. This might help you begin to land. If you still are insecure, don't know where your feet are, feel a lot of muscular effort, it's very tense, full, then you're going to need more grounding. I always recommend little sandbags, little ankle weights, things on the feet, and maybe even something across the pelvis, anything that helps you get into bone. And weight is one of the ways we access bone. Why? Because we want to be landed. This helps our nervous system locate, and then we can be more fluid and juicy inside. We can be more aware of the deliciousness of psoas. Now, that might be your psoas. Your psoas may have some disruption. It might be overused, misused, abused. So we're just in the beginning. And if you join me on Wednesdays, I'm going to keep developing all the ideas that are in my book, Core Awareness. The Soas book is my first book. It tells you about the psoas and how to rethink it, not as this muscle that you need to stretch or release, but actually a wise kind of like an organ of perception. It is informing you of your own central nervous system and how it's able to locate you, how your bones, what's called proprioception, is capable of locating you as an animal body in space and time. So when that's disrupted, we're chaotic, we're disrupted, we're overwhelmed. We feel a lot, and yet we are actually disassociated in many ways. We're disorganized. And people often feel that in their upper psoas, a cut between upper and lower body. But this translation of lat to foot is a diagonal expression. It's also a dynamic movement between the two. So we're looking for that today. So the next place we're going to play is letting the leg slide out and rocking it a little bit. And if your pelvis goes with your leg, you know you need articulating of the hip socket. So this is sometimes telling you what you need. It's what I call going backwards. Once I see my leg can't extend on its own, I have to ask the question, why not? What is interrupting a beautiful movement, kind of like the octopus extending their tentacle? What is interrupting that makes all these hiccups along the way? A lot of it is dryness in tissue. This is where strategies and playfulness around hydration, not just drinking and fluids in your body, but the actual movement of tissue, returning it to a more fluid state. You could say, it's like water. It is water. So water can be very fluid, almost steam-like, almost elusive, and that's what a healthy psoas is. Or it can be like hard frozen ice, and that can be what your psoas is. So do the other foot, and just place your hands where your upper psoas is, and just see when you rock your foot, is there any kind of vibration? Can you kind of softly, gently, maybe call into that dry or frozen or rigid or damaged sometimes through surgeries tissue? Now, the connection from spine to foot is, as I said, not just the psoas, because the psoas ends in the inner part of that femur bone you just tapped on, but it translates into the bone. It's sending a message. So when you do it again, track your foot a little bit and notice where you start to feel a disconnect from your spine to your foot. Play with that just a little bit. I notice there's a relief when I feel my foot rocking. There's a sense of, oh, here I am. I'm on the floor. A sense of what I call locating, landing and locating. That's in bone. So I work a lot with the feet, especially the ankles. That's really important. Well, let's work with the psoas and the arms. So the hands face each other. So I can see my thumbs, but I can't see my pinky. I'm not turned in, I'm just neutral. And my arms are reaching, but not really reaching, but let's really reach. Let's reach up to the ceiling and drop the arm. Do it a couple times, as if, oh, I'm going to touch it, but then I let it go. Oh, I'm going to touch it, and then I drop. And then I do the other one. What this helps differentiate is your shoulder girdle from your arm. Now your shoulders should be actually more rested, more grounded in the bone, and your arms are able to move in the ball and socket joint. Now, the game here, the play, is not to just move the arms over the head, because you can do that in some strange way. That's called compensation. What we want to work with the arms is to not engage the psoas. So this area of your body, this soft tissue we call the solar plexus, that all your organs, reproductive organs, are lower, but here is the small intestine. It's where we weave, differentiate or delineate, where we transform, straw into gold. It's where we digest and decide what is useful and what isn't. Powerful area between diaphragm, psoas, and your organs. And I'm not going to pull on that area. I'm going to keep that sense of connection to foot while I begin to move the arms over the head. And the moment I start to feel myself leave the connection of feet, where I feel like my ribs and hands and everything is lifting me up out of myself, I'm going to pause. This is a beautiful place to just rest for a moment. To not try, to not
will myself to move my arms, but to just be in this expression. You could move the arms a little out and in if you want just a little bit of movement to add to it. So you're not frozen here, you're just kind of shimmering here. And see if you can let go of any tension you took on in that solar plexus and let it go down to the feet and go then a little bit further. I'll tell you a secret. The eyes are very important. We always look for what we long for. There is a way the eyes follow the expression. They may even lead the expression if I was really looking to reach for something. But they're not looking. They're not closed. They're not deadened. You're not moving the arms mechanically. You are responsive as an expression of longing, of desire, of inclusion, of reaching out, bringing in. It's a full expression. So nothing's locked down. I am grounded here. So like the trees that branches come out of that rootedness, so do the arms as they begin to go over. And you may not go all the way. And I would say don't even try. Just come back. It's not to say we can't go that far. It's to say, let's keep focused here, not what the arms can do, not the range of motion of the arm, but the expression of yourselves. So take a moment and just notice what that stirred up. Because we're going to work with this groundedness and then letting the arms do what they can actually do in an expression of connection. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll to our side. So take a moment to just roll. So what I'm talking about is that Soas is a grounding wire, I used to call it in the olden days when I used a little more of a mechanical language. But as my language has grown, has articulated into a living biosystem, then I recognize that the idea of rooting is more actually accurate. We have to root to be able to express. Yeah, otherwise I overextend, I go beyond my boundaries, I don't know where my boundaries are, and I'm often overwhelmed by that. It's a dispersion of energy rather than a rootedness that allows my energy to be a well of inspiration and a sense of belonging to the earth. So even when I'm here, I can put my hand here and I can just rock that area of like my torso back and forth just a little bit with my hand on my solar plexus. They call it a solar plexus because it's a plexus of nerves. It's a deep, profound, powerful area of knowing. Organs, we've got our kidneys here, which are part of our life force. We have this small intestine coming from the stomach. What have we eaten? How do we digest that? What have we experienced? And how do we metabolize that? We have our liver and gallbladder on one side, our stomach, pancreas, spleen on the other. There's a lot happening here. And Soas is behind it all. So when your Soas is that elusive, juicy, fluid response, then it's offering a lot of support to your organ function. And when it's dry and hard and held and tight, it's actually not helpful. It can actually be damaging. So we want to see if we can soften the belly a little bit. It's not that you can't have abdominals that have tone, but they're an accordion. They're supposed to let you arc and curl as a living organism. We are more like a caterpillar than a column. Okay, so we have to find our tail to tongue here a little bit. Because although we're extending out into feet and hands today, we have to keep returning to the core as its impulse for that expression. We don't give up something to extend, we actually open or blossom or express 360 degrees tubular movement. So we're orbital. We're an orbital organism, and the psoas is an orbital tissue. It's like a juicy cucumber that's been peeled. It's round and it's picking up information in the back body. So when I play with this curling and arcing, and I think of it as tongue to tail, imagine the caterpillar curling and then opening and arcing to explore, the tree caterpillar that longs to go up into the tree has an extension to it, but it's not a pulling, it's an undulating. So I'm using my hand to show you the movement I'm making from tail to tongue, and it's soft. And it's not necessarily linear. It could feel more like seaweed in water. These kind of movements is where those of you who have a ball, you might want to deflate and put along your waistline to feel more of that. Or, up under your armpit, like we can play with balls to help us find fluidity in tissue. So now we're going to take this and we're going to extend one leg and see if we can do it from the side here. Can we lengthen out the leg? And that's just not from here, but from here. Imagine the foot is connecting and just swing the leg a little bit from that place. If you feel it all in the musculature, that implies to me a little too dense, not enough bone. So again, finding bone, maybe putting your hand on the side bone and going up and down the side bone. And then trying it again. See if you can find your foot from the spine, your solar plexus, like an exhale. Oh, there's my foot. Now we're going to do the arm on this side. So the arm isn't the shoulder. The arm is actually the wing. The latissimus comes from the back of the pelvis. So the pelvis can't distort for the wing to open. It actually stays grounded, and the wing comes from the edge of the pelvis up into this fan-shaped muscle that's actually feels beyond the tissue. So we start, back up a little bit so you can see me. I'm going to start with my hand as the gesture of movement. And just, like you're dusting the floor. I'm just dusting the floor with my hand. That's the hand moving. And you can feel how your shoulder is responding, but your back may be quiet. So now place your hand, if you can, right under your armpit, around to the back, and see if you can move this tissue to move your hand. What would it be like for something to spread that came from the back body? Now, you may need some prep work for this. You may need to do some rolling, some hydrating. This may be a little beyond you for today, but even the imagining that right now your wing is not your shoulder girdle, it's actually from the crack of your butt up and spreading beyond. So this space right here is part of the gesture of movement. So it's not a reach from the shoulder, it's an expression of expansion through the core. And the eyes, as I said, always, the secret of the eyes is to let them follow the hand. That immediately gives you a lot more expression along the back body. So latissimus is this gauze-like, and one of the ways to start to feel it is to feel your skin and your clothes, like that surface. The skin begins to spread with the latissimus, like a butterfly wing. My hand, notice it stays on the floor. It's not flying, okay? We have to be grounded in the bone for us to feel this lucid tissue of psoas and lats. Both of them are very dynamic and very delicate. That's one of the other things they have in common. One grows up, the other grows down. One grows deep, the other one grows out into the world. They're a beautiful relationship of Soas to Latissimus, of this expansion of hands and feet. So before we leave here to go to the other side, I want you to see if you can do both. Can you let the coming from the very torso be the place, and all tissue expands around that impulse to lengthen it. It can span in two directions, and it can be not just a linear expansion, but a broad dynamic expansion. So letting the arm, not the hand, but the back body lengthen the arm from your, almost it feels like a delicious, again, kind of like that fan of opening. And then just take a moment and pause and see how that feels, because we're going to switch sides. Now I'm going to switch sides so I can watch the camera, but you can switch sides by rolling over and not watching me if you want, or come back to that later. Just roll to the other side. When I do change sides, I always take a moment to like notice, like, well, what happened? And I can say that this side feels more cohesive, and this side feels more like parts. Now there's such a delicacy to psoas. You know, it's the juiciest cut of meat we eat in a mammal. It's psoas. It's filet mignon. And when I think of this tissue called latissimus, I have no idea how it's prepared, if it's part of, you know, the world of meat eating. That's why I use for anyone who's vegetarian, you know, the juicy cucumber. But it is literally, from a butcher's point of view, that is the cut of meat. But the lat is like this very delicate, it's like a wing or a bat where you see the skin. It has that feeling of moving beyond the boundary of your body. So psoas is, you know, very clearly in the core of your being. And lat is kind of growing up out of that basin of the root chakra, the basin of your belly core, up out into your arm. That's your, whether that's primates swinging through trees, that's where they're using their lats. So if you want to watch the lat in its action as a muscle or as like a mover, then watch the primates as they swing through trees, and they kind of have that beautiful swing that's coming from their core, and their lower body isn't involved very much except to let the whole spine swing. That's its movement. In the psoas, the movement is the swing of the leg and walking, the free swing. The psoas doesn't move you, your core of your being moves you, but psoas translates that beautiful swing into the foot. So here on this side, we want to start the same way. We want to start with just a little rock of the gut area, solar plexus, psoas. Lat starts lower. It starts coming up out of the basin of the pelvis. And that you also see when you watch primates swing through trees, or children by that matter. You know, I watch children on jungle gyms swing. They use their lats beautifully. They haven't held them down doing mechanical movements like driving a car or even riding a bicycle necessarily can do that, you know, whereas they're opening their system up when they swing. So you'll see a person who's really in their lat, not using their shoulder socket. It's interesting. They're playing with the wing and the air. So again, very superficial. So we've done a little bit of rocking here. We're going to take it now into the leg. Now, what we didn't do on this side, we did on the other side, is do some tail to tongue. So just sit there for a moment, bring your leg back or rest there for a moment and just notice how that feels. Is there a difference? Let's explore. Let's do a little tail to tongue. That's that curling and arcing through the torso. Tail to tongue. So the articulation of the spine helps the skeletal system locate, and this helps all tissue we call muscle be more supple, stronger, but not dense. So it has the ability to shape shift and to not overwhelm our sense of location. Muscles are a lot about movement. They're not necessarily locators unless you have some hypermobility. And then they can be helpful. But the locators are in the joints. So I'm trying not to stress my joints. One of the things the Soas gets involved with is when you tear ligaments and you injure your joints, then the Soas knows you can't locate. Joints are ecolocators. They tell us about range of motion, but they also tell us where we are on the earth. Interesting. You don't hear that too much. But perceptually, that's one of the ways we know where we are. It's where we feel ourselves a sense of groundedness. Okay, so I've done a little tail to tongue. It's very subtle, this isn't a big movement. And then I'm going to go again from, now this time I did it with my knee. You can see that. This time I'm going to stay here and see if I can allow the movement, just even through my imagination, come from the very beginning of Soas, and then it travels, and the conversation is in my foot. So that's that free swing of the leg and walking that I want. If you use your knee to walk, you stop, you limit, you deaden the core. You're carrying your core on your knees. No, you want to be that octopus. Everything is centrally located and it emerges out of the center of our expression. So it comes from not distortion, but energetically a spine-based response, a heartfelt response. So think of your heart being involved here, the heart to the foot, the heart to the earth. You're creating a movement. And then you can kind of play with that and feel, you might even feel your high heart expressing that longing to move. Okay. Now let's play with the arm. We start with the hand, get a feel for that, find your elbow, your shoulder socket. So that's your bones, and that's your sockets. But we're going to work with the latissimus. So that, remember, the latissimus is coming from behind. The back body is coming around to move the arm. So there's no overextension. There's no lifting up out of my torso. I'm not holding anything down. I'm just not engaging anything because the back body is expanding. My wings are opening. Feels delicious. And then include both. Eyes follow fingers. Remember, the eyes are always present to where I'm longing for. That opens the throat, helps me speak my truth or express myself. So it's and then I come back. So come on up. We're going to take this into, there's all different kinds of lat explorations, and you'll find those in core awareness. But I want to play on the chair. I want to teach those of you who have worked with me quite a bit how to start working with the chair with the Soas lat relationship. So let's stand up,
see how we're feeling. Maybe get yourself a drink of water. Make sure you're staying hydrated and just hang here for a moment in this place of curiosity of, well, what did that do? How did that make me feel? I actually feel taller right now. I feel really lengthened out in a really pleasant way, not pulled or stretched, but just feet. I feel my feet on the floor and I feel my bones lifting me. That is proprioception. So that feels really good. And then if I play with my arms a little bit, I see where that freedom of movement is. One of the play to get in touch with your lat is to stand near a wall and give yourself a little bit of a push. If you have a door, stand in the doorway and just do a little isometric push against the wall, but don't collapse into the wall. Just stay and feel that resistance against the wall through your arm. Step away and watch how your arm flips. That's your lat. So interesting. Kids naturally do that movement. So then do the other side. Push against the wall. I'm not hurting myself. I'm just using an isometric, a little activation. And then step away and feel the lat. So that's the freedom of the lat. We're going to take it to a chair. So if you have a chair, set that up. And you can come back to this for a while. It'll be available to you. And we can play with it again. So when I play on the chair, there's lots of ways to play with lats. And, you know, we could do different things. We could cross pattern because lats have a lot to do with our ability to cross pattern. And why is that important is because that's what walking is. Walking is a cross pattern relationship. We don't walk one side and then the other side. You do when you first start. It's a kind of, how do I do this? But as the spine, the nervous system develops and the brain develops, it's a cross patterned relationship. So your head to your pelvis is cross patterned. What's happening in the throat and neck is affecting your hip. You know, there's cross patterns. Well, lats are an expression, and so are the psoas down. So we can play with that freedom that happens, maintaining the core integrity while doing a movement like reaching, you know. So let's play with that just a tiny bit before we then flip to the side. Get on the edge of your chair, you have your feet on the ground, on the floor, and lean forward and pull the sits bones out of, the butt muscles out of the way of the sits bones. So those are called your tuberosities. And so you want to feel them equally weighted as the feet are also equally weighted. And you're on the edge because you really don't want your hamstrings or the muscles of the leg, the quads, to be too involved, or the adductor, like nothing. You want to be more, again, you know, a little bone tapping. I usually do one leg at a time, but you can also do two, you know, just to kind of locate. To put a little weight on your feet if you have little sandbags. Things that help you feel bone. Okay, so now we're sitting and we're going to play with this lat idea, or this expression of lat as a angle, a wing that can change. So the pelvis can't move. So if you put your hands on your rim of your pelvis and you take your thumbs, the back of the rim, that whole back area, is where the lat grows up and out. If you sit and all that's really dry, you're going to need to hydrate that through using an inflatable ball or doing some soft rolling, because that has to be able to move, or else when you go to move your arm, you pull on your pelvis and you distort your sacroiliac joints, what's called your SI joints, the ligaments that hold your pelvis into harmony. So that's one reason to open your lats, is helps you center your pelvis. And a centered pelvis means that it can locate in gravity. It's not
distorted. It's not picking up mixed messages. It's very centered no matter where you're moving from. It's one of the traditions of the martial arts, the traditions of Qigong, and many of the movements of centering has to do with a pelvis that can rock in gravity, but is not broken up into parts, but works as a whole. So the arms and the lats play a part of that. And this is one of the relationships between lats and psoas, is that if your lats are really tight, your psoas gets involved because you're pulling on your pelvis, and your psoas says, that's part of your central nervous system. That's part of knowing where I am. It's part of my coherency as an organism. You can't do that. And so then it gets involved to take over for the ligaments you've damaged. So this is one of their partnerships. So opening the lats helps your psoas be healthy. So let's try that idea of reaching, just not from here, but from the opening of the lat. So it can be more of a gracious reaching, or a waving of a wand, or coming back and looking at the flower, or picking something, and cross. And just as you play with this movement, see how much freedom you have, not in the shoulder girdle, but in your pelvis staying stable, and yet your arm is able to move. So my pelvis doesn't distort to do any of these movements. That's what I want. If there's distortion, get yourself centered and then only move, try the other arm, as much as you can. And you'll see, oh, my movement is small. It can't let me reach or wand or tissue like a bat wing fly. I can't fly because my lat is dry and it pulls on my pelvis. So our last piece to this class is to learn to be on a chair and play. Is this for beginners? Maybe not. Maybe first you have to get some juiciness going on the floor, and playfulness, and remembering as a child how much you loved to roll around in different relationships to gravity. The reason of doing this in a very practical way is that when we change gravity, we were on the floor, now we're sitting, our whole organism reorganizes itself and we perceive differently. It changes perception to move. So that's one reason I changed perception. It also moves tissue and organs in different relationships to gravity. And that is stimulating, it's nourishing, it's hydrating, it's digesting. It's like, oh, this is what allows something to not be compact and dry and dense. Okay? So I'm not an object, I'm a living process. And when I play with gravity, I'm being reshaped by gravity, because bone is informed by the gravitational field. That's what grows bone, that's what makes it living and breathing, is that we're alive on the earth. And the earth is constantly shaping us. So if we sit all day, we are shaped by that lack of movement as much as the movements we do. If I'm only running forward, I'm only being shaped a certain way. If I'm playing on a ball in different ways, I'm playing for a while and then I go for a walk, I'm going to notice a difference in the way that I experience the earth, ground, the land, the way I feel about myself. So movement is medicine, and movement is life. And we ultimately don't move, we are movement. So I'm going to ask you to play along with me if you want. I'm going to I'm on one sits bone right now. The other one is off the chair. And I'm getting ready to go sideways on the chair. So I'm taking it one step at a time, and I'm going to the side of the chair. My arm is here. Now, there's different ways to do this. You could have something higher here so that your full arm wasn't lengthened out. It could be bent, okay? but I'm also weighted here on the chair. And when I rock on the chair doesn't move. That is so important. Otherwise, you end up falling off the chair. The chair tosses you. So it has to be a strong enough chair. And then you have to be able to play and move in that. So as I go down into my elbow to arm, I'm now starting to play with psoas in a different relationship to gravity. Remember that movement of heart or solar plexus to foot. I can play with that. I can let my jaw open and feel the pleasure of playing with psoas in a different relationship to gravity, with either the knee bent or the leg extended. I know this isn't fully upside down, but it's a really wonderful way of then including the lat. So now I'm kind of playing with lat and psoas, and I'm moving in whatever ways feel pleasurable. My hands become my feet, and my feet become my hands. It's a wonderful, playful way of movement. Fun to dance this way, to put a music on that moves you emotionally and play with this idea. Tongue to tail. So you can include that in your play. Now I'm going to come up and I'm going to take a minute because, of course, you want to organize yourself. And if you are a person who gets dizzy, you might want to take this slow and easy. And you may not want to do it at all. So, talk to your physician. Can I play on a chair? Okay. So health issues can play a part in your feeling safe. So I want you to think wisely about what's okay to do and not okay. But I'm going to switch sides just because it does feel differently to be on both sides. I don't have to, when I play this way, do something equally because I'm not, I'm what's called a bilateral being. I'm not symmetrical. So I'm not an object. I don't, if I'm on a machine, I have to perform like the machine expects, which is equally on both sides. But when we're really looking at symmetry, it comes out of bilateral movement. So how I moved on one side is going to be different than on the other. And that's actually brings me to a more coherent spine and center axis. So movement always comes from the center axis, but its expression is diverse. You don't have the same organs on both sides of your body, so you don't emotionally express the same way. We don't do the same things with both sides of our body. Like we need to let it all unravel back to wholeness, back to oneness. And this is one of the reasons I do this. So I'm on my side now, and I can play a little bit with my legs if I want, or I can play with my arm. And I know sometimes I've had pillows or bolsters where I could put my head on it. There's so many ways, but today we're playing, my chair is a little snaggy here, the upper psoas down through the foot. So that kind of wave motion we were just playing with, that swing of the leg in walking. And we're also playing with the lats, being able to really come from the back body out and reach with the reaching piece. And then if I want to go a little lower into it to allow the leg to really fly, I can begin to not work from the hip socket, but from the spine. Again, spine-based organism. Find the tail to tongue, and then let the movement come from that. It feels very aquatic. The lungs become aquatic again in the sense that there's lateral breathing. It's no longer an up and down, front to back, it's orbital. We're moving into orbital expression. rather than linear expression. Spirals sometimes show up. Rotational expression, but I stay out of my joints. I'm not so much trying to work in my joints. I'm looking for lats, so I have to keep going light. If I go too heavy, I go into those joints and I start, kind of screwing my joints in certain ways, trying to get them to function. But what really opens the skeletal system is the freedom to be able to float in connective tissue. Bones float and they organize in gravity through fluid. So because Latissimus is very much about diagonals, working one side and not both arms at the same time, just like the arms swing when you're walking, is really useful to them. In other words, they don't really like lateral movement. They like one side doing something and the other side, and then the other side doing something. Again, the primate moving through space. So stand up after you've done that and just take a moment to see. I'm in a cabin right now, and I have this little ledge here, and I can hang from one lat and kind of give myself that feeling of not moving around the joint, but letting the lats fan open. Makes your arm feel like it's, 3 inches longer. All of a sudden your arms grow when your lat opens. Love the feeling of lat expansion. It's so freeing, and it all comes from the back. So it's opening back body. Back body is where we're so defended, right? It's where when we curl, we're protected. But we don't want to be defended all the time. We want our wings to open and the expansion of our body to feel its fullness in all dimensions. And that's what this class has been all about. Thank you for joining me. I apologize again for the confusion of being able to be live with you, but I hope you enjoy this video. Bye for now.